Well, going along with the writing, is there anything unique about your process that you would like to share?
Well, I don't think, I don't know if there's anything unique, but what I tend to do is let things roll around in my head for a long, long time. I'll know that I want to have something written by a certain date. So I know that's out there. Maybe that's my demon, my first demon. I think the first thing I do always is say, okay, who's the audience? What's my intention? What's my message? And use plain language. Does this need to inspire in some way? How do I put words together to be inspirational? And I don't think if you start putting things on paper immediately, the inspiration, I'm not sure you get it. But when you work things around in your mind and you're thinking about it, sometimes words come together in ways that they wouldn't on the page. And then at some point I'll know it's time to start putting things down. Now this isn't good advice for a student, you know, oh well, just let it roll around in your mind until something comes to you. I think, well, back to your question, so that's the way it works. And then usually what happens is when I write it down, it'll either be the penultimate or the final, one or the other. I tend to, when I do that, I go right to a word processor. But I think for other kinds of writing, sometimes for writing, I find the best thing to do is to just take 10 minutes and say, okay, Bill, just start writing. Okay? Just 10 minutes, that's all you got to do, just 10 minutes, and just have a place where you're going to keep that. And sometimes that creates momentum. And sometimes the 10 minutes will be up, and okay, 10 minutes is up. But sometimes I'll just keep going. That momentum will keep me going. Next thing I know, it's 20 or 30 minutes. But I think in terms of students and their writing, I think if you you see this huge project, it looks mountainous to you. It's like that garage you got to clean out, and you think, oh, it's floor to ceiling with junk and furniture, all this kind of stuff, and then finally when you go to the garage, all there is in there is a couch, right? Because you've imagined it to be worse than it is. But if you say, okay, I can spare 10 minutes, and I'll just start writing, assuming I know what I'm supposed to write, and it creates momentum, and the next thing you know, you've got something pretty good to work on.
So how do you know, like you said, how do you know it's the final draft? How do you get there?
Well, for me, kind of, I'm consciously doing this, working in my head, and then I'll just say, okay, it's time. And just something will come to me, it's time. And then I'll just drop whatever I'm doing, and I'll go and hammer out. And sometimes it's the final, and sometimes it's next to final, and that's worked out pretty well over time. What I've found is also, since a lot of the writing I do is to prepare, like to give a speech or something like that, that by doing it that way, once I write it down, the only reason to write it down really is so if someone in university relations needs the text of it. I don't like to read speeches, and so that's why sometimes what I say and what I wrote will differ in some ways, but I think in terms of students, you've got public speaking and communications, and you've got English and writing, and you've got rhetoric. These things fit together in different ways. And so if the assignment is to give a talk about something, that's quite different than handing a paper over to some people about something. But I think the thing is, everybody works their own style. Now, obviously, I will never be a novelist or anything like that, because I don't think you get there by letting it roll around in your mind. I think so many novelists I read about, they're very disciplined, and they write. They sit down and they write, and it's work. I mean, they love it, but it's work. It's kind of like as a professor, if mathematics is your area, you've got a set of time you're going to be doing mathematics. You've got a set of time you're going to be preparing for your class, and so forth and so on.
Well, maybe it's not that different in some ways, rolling it around on the page versus rolling it around in your head.
Yeah, and I think technology makes it easier on the page than handwriting, absolutely. And I think one thing I'd say to students is block out, once you know who your audience is and what the message is to be. Sometimes you can block it out, and of course, in the writing instructors are going to say, okay, there are some certain things that need to be in here, and so forth and so on. It's like in public speaking. Tell them what you're going to tell them, and tell them you told them. That's kind of the general setup. But in writing, it's maybe there's some of that the same, right? But sometimes what you can do is say, okay, you can write block 1 X, block 2 Y, block 3 Z, and that just gives you comfort sometimes to say, okay, now I know kind of what it's going to look like, and then you can go in and work each block. And I think word processors are a great aid, but they don't replace the creative process, obviously, which is the most important part.